And we're going to be continuing in the second chapter of the 13th book of Yisrayl, part 1. And the title of the chapter 2 this evening, is The News Today Showing Prophecy Fulfilled. The End is Near. And, one of the apostles, he made this statement. And this statement has always really kind of stuck with me, and I think we need to keep this in mind always, that our salvation is nearer now, today, than when we first believed, when we first came to Yahweh's house. Because as each day passes, that's one day less, men, that we have to overcome. And this is why we really need to strive and to overcome and to believe the things that we've been taught all these years. And we have believed without seeing. And now, as Pastor has said, now we're actually seeing the things that we believed. We're seeing these things come to pass. They're coming to pass in detail. And we see these things actually coming forth in the news, in the news. And this is why why Pastor goes through and we have the newsreels, the news footage, on Sabbath, so we can see these things, so we can actually see these things coming to pass, and to help, to build our faith and to build our trust, and so we can actually see, yes, these things are coming to pass. And we're shown here that in the last days. Remember the warning we were given in 2 Timothy chapter 3. It says, in the last days that perilous times will come. And when you look up the word perilous, you actually see, the very world that we live in today. Perilous is more than just danger. It's extreme danger. And in the last days, the apostle, he was inspired to write that these perilous times will come, and we know the last days. Yeshua showed us that the last days would be in a time period when mankind would have the ability to destroy all life off the face of the earth. And that has never, ever been possible until this last generation, until this current generation that we're in, with the invention of the nuclear weapons, with the atomic bombs. There's nowhere you can go, man. There's nowhere we can go to hide from these things. Because the radiation, these things, they will seek, they will find us. But in the last days, when mankind has this actual ability to destroy all life off the face of the earth, and we're shown here that in Matthew 24, that unless those days were shortened, that there would no flesh be saved. So showing just how dangerous those times were. I mean, imagine being in the days of the apostles and the prophets, realizing just how bad that would have to be. And we're living in that time period right now. I mean, you can see it with the wars and with the rumors of wars. You can see it with the so-called natural disasters. Look at the disease epidemics. Look with the Ebola, how it spread. Look at the antibiotic-resistant bacteria now. There's certain sexually transmitted diseases right now that can't be treated. They're immune to everything. And if there's nothing to hold them in check, what are they going to do? It's going to be like a wildfire. I mean, they're just going to, just like a rolling stone going down the hill. It's going to keep gathering speed. But these natural disasters, these wars, these rumors of wars, were also shown in 2 Kepha chapter 3 and verse 3, that in the last days that men would be lovers of themselves, lovers of pleasure more than of the righteous laws of Yahweh. And the people have taken these laws, and the teachers, those who were supposed to keep the law and supposed to teach the law, they've turned the law into a burden. They've turned the law, and they make the people think, they've convinced the people, they've influenced the people to think that the laws are a curse. When in fact, it's the very laws of Yahweh that were created to protect mankind from the very things that mankind is experiencing right now. And we've seen the news footage, we've seen the articles, we've seen what this particular man has said. And he was prophesied that he would do these things in Daniel chapter 11. I think it's around verse 21 we see this. We see a man who is very skilled in trickery and in dark sayings. And he has the people convinced. He has the entire world convinced that righteousness is evil, that the keeping of the law of Yahweh is evil, and that being like the gods and being like the gods, taking on the characteristic of the gods, is righteous. We saw video footage of that last week. And yet the very things that he is saying, he has the people come. You can see the look on the people's faces. They were just following, just taking in every word that he said, not even realizing that the Savior, Yeshua, in the very scriptures when he was alive, he said, don't even think I've come to destroy the law or the prophets. I didn't come to do away with these things. But yet here this man said, well, do we really want to reduce salvation and everything down to keeping the 613 man-made laws? It's ridiculous. But the people are, they're deceived, and they're convinced that this man is right, and that, as Isaiah 59:15 says, that anyone who would depart from iniquity, they're not looked at as righteous. They're not looked at as holy men. They're not looked up and said, these men stand for their convictions, or these women are stand up, and these women are held up. They're looked at and respected for their convictions. No, they're looked at as if they're mad. They're crazy. You're crazy for trying to keep those old laws. Don't you know God just wants you to love? And then on page 16 here, around verse 2 here, Pastor, he shows here, he's talking about the news media. He says, and he says, and they're lying here when they say that murder through abortion is declining. This is something else that they try to, this is another way that they can try to twist things around. They can try to twist things around through statistics. When I was going through school, there was a book called How to Lie with Statistics. It was it was the course material that we read. But it shows how you can actually manipulate numbers and present things in a certain way to perpetuate a lie through statistics. So we need to be very careful when we're looking at these things, and look for these things. They're saying here that these murders or that these abortions are declining. But the fact is, what they don't show. They're only showing certain types might be on the decrease. But what they're not showing is that maybe the other types, the morning after pill and these other things that they have, are on the increase. The end result is the same, right? The end result is the termination of a life. Murder is murder. That doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's by doctor or by pharmacist. In the world, they cannot stand it. Pastor, he shows here. He says you can go ahead and turn the television off. He says that's what you are. That's what the scripture shows you as murderers. He says, you can believe it or not, that's what you are. He says, you can go ahead and turn off the television if you want to. You can turn off the television, turn off the radio, kind of like an ostrich sticking their head in the sand. But that doesn't change a thing. Just because, I can't hear you, so I don't have to listen to it, so I'm not that. That doesn't make one bit of difference whatsoever. He says, you can go ahead and do these things, that you really need to cut your temper down. I know you're wanting to kill me. I'm not speaking of this group here, speaking of those here and those who are accepting this message. But those who are hearing this message and whose anger just boils because, why? Because their sins are being exposed. They're being exposed for who they are. They're being exposed for the liars that they are, because they teach not according to the law and the prophets. And they hate this house, and they hate Pastor Forthe. That's why they hated the apostles. That's why they hated the prophets. That's why they hated Yeshua. That's why they were killed. And the only thing we need to do is stand strong. We need to stand in our place, not turn to the right or the left, because Yahweh promises that this work will not be put into the grave. It says this work is going to continue. And the times are going to get rough. Pastor has warned us of that. He said the times are going to get bad. If you remember, many years before he was arrested, he made the comment, remember? He said, what are y'all going to do when they come and arrest me? Are you going to stand or are you going to run? And at that time, what did people say? Well, everybody said, oh, no, we're not going anywhere. We're all going to stand. Many did. Many stood. But many turned tail and ran as well. But Yahweh's house, here at Yahweh's house, we have a wonderful future to look forward to. We have everything to look forward to because Yahweh is showing us the way that this world is going. Well, the world's future looks dark. They can't see any way out of where they are. Their future looks dark and grim out of their eyes. But they don't understand. They don't understand the plan of Yahweh. They don't see that. But we do. We know that we know the plan of Yahweh because we've had the greatest teacher in the world teaching us about this plan of Yahweh. We know that this world has to experience what they're going through right now because they have to experience what sin brings because they don't believe or they don't believe without seeing. And the other thing, what we have to remember too, man, is that what we see the world going through, the sickness, the disease, the birth defects, that everyone is going through at this time in this world that has not been called into Yahweh's house, men, we have to remember that these things are temporary. That the world is experiencing, they are temporary to them. You know why that is? Is because that these people, when the time comes, and when these people die, and those that do die, guess what? They're going to be resurrected. They're going to be resurrected so that they can be taught the very things that we're learning here today. That's why it's temporary. So, if we're here by ourselves and we're not here with our families, and our families have written us off as being crazy or whatever, okay, well, praise Yahweh. Because they're going to have an opportunity. Men, our opportunity is now. We have to stand in our place now. We have to take hold of this golden oil because this time is getting short. It's not going to get any longer. It's getting shorter as each day passes. And what better opportunity are we going to have, or let me rephrase that. What better opportunity is our family going to have if we're there to teach them? If we're there when they're resurrected, and we can be there as that example, and they can see that everything that we stood for was absolutely 110% correct. How much better of an opportunity are they going to have? I mean, you think about the psychological impact that's going to have on them. That is going to be a tremendous blessing. To qualify men, there is a great blessing that comes with, over here in verse 10, Pastor writes here, he tells us, there's a great blessing that comes with obedience, he says. A tremendous blessing comes from obedience. Has anybody ever experienced a blessing that comes from rebellion? Is there anything in history where it is recorded? I mean, there's nothing that I can think of, but is there anywhere where anybody has been blessed because of practicing rebellion? I mean, Cain wasn't blessed because of his rebellion. Look what the world is going through now. They've gone the way of Cain. There's no blessings that come from that way. There's only heartache. There's only problems. But we have to prove ourselves as obedient to the authority that has been placed over us. And then these blessings are going to come. Mankind, rebelled. Here in verse 12, I think he shows here. Pastor was telling us and showing us. He showed us a picture of a pig with an apple in its mouth. I don't know if you remember that picture, but he showed us, especially around Christmas time and around these pagan holidays, the days of as we're getting into the month of We will soon be getting into the month of December, which represents the descending of the gods. The representation of this pig's head with this apple in the middle of it. And Pastor shows here. He says that this is supposed to represent. This is supposed to indicate Eve, the first sin of Eve, the apple. That's the forbidden fruit. And of course, the forbidden fruit was the forbidden fruit, of course, was the pig. Was the pig. What's one of the, you think about the rebellion that took place. Sexual sins are a very, very strong pull for people. One of the strongest pulls that exist. Well, one of the other things that is very, very powerful is the need for us to eat and drink. If we don't eat and drink, we're not going to live very long. We might live for a little while, and some of us, because we've stored up things a little bit better than others, might live just a little bit longer, okay? But if we don't eat and drink, then we're gonna die of starvation. We're gonna die of dehydration. And if we don't put the right foods and the right type of water into our bodies, Pastor has shown that the microorganisms aren't going to be able to work properly. Our bodies aren't going to function properly. So one of the things that was done, that Satan inspired to be done, was the pollution of the food supply. You think about that. What's one of the best ways to attack them? Well, attack them through the food supply. And that's been a tactic of war for ages. If you control the food supply, you're going to control the people. And this is why we have to be careful in going out, if we're out in the world, and, when we go out in the world, when we do go to the grocery stores, we have to be careful, we have to be mindful. And Pastor, he brought out how when you take a look in some of the display cases, you'll see all kinds of stuff all thrown together. You might see chicken here, you might see turkey here, then above that, you got several different cuts of pork chop that are on an incline like this, and all that nasty pork juice is running right down into everything else. Everything in that case is contaminated. The same way with the fish, the exact same way there. It's all contaminated. And Pastor, he showed that there's great lengths that have been gone through to provide Yahweh's people with the cleanest food possible. And we have the cleanest food on the face of the planet here in Yahweh's house. It doesn't get any better than where it is right here and right now. And it's been done for us. Yahweh has done that for us. Let's see here. Boy, I don't know what I was taking my notes with. Boy, that's sure not adding up to where I thought I was. Okay. But Pastor shows here, he says in verse 16, he says, if you go over to Revelation now, we see a number of things here taking place. And remember this news because everything here fits into today's prophecy. And again, this is why we see these things written here, written in the news. Shown to us in the news. To show how these things are fitting into prophecy and how prophecy is progressing. And when we were going to go over this morning, I said, I need to forego the sermon I was going to bring because there's so much news just popping out here in Revelation that we need to get it into our mind of what's taking place here. He says we're shown here first in the first few chapters of how, let me see here, he says he said how Yahweh would provide for himself a lamb, and that lamb, of course, was Yahshua. Yahshua, which means he will save his people from their sins. And that is, Pastor, he explains that. He says that is, he will show them how to keep the Sabbath. Well, what has Pastor been doing for years now? He's been showing us how to keep the Sabbath. He's been showing us how and teaching us how to keep the laws of Yahweh. He comes and teaches us. He places his name, and his name means total righteousness, and this is where that's where he places it. He places it in your mind at his house if you go there to be taught. And this is why we come here. We don't come here to teach. We don't come here to set the house of Yahweh straight or to set pastor straight. We come here to be set straight because our minds are the ones that have been polluted. Now, the seventh messenger is the one who he chooses, that he did choose, to take the seals off, because Daniel said this is all sealed now until the end time. You remember there in Daniel. And Daniel, because Daniel was wanting to know what this knowledge was. He was wanting to know what these prophecies meant. And Yahweh said, nope, go your way, Daniel. It's not for you to know. And Daniel, he begged. He begged Yahweh, please, Yahweh, tell me, what do these things mean? Nope, not for you to know, Daniel. Go to sleep. It's not for your time period. It's for the time of the end. Well, the seventh Moloch, it was meant for him, and it's his job to remove these seals and to explain these things completely, in detail to us. Now, these prophecies here in Isaiah, the scholars say, this is just the beginning of the prophecies. They read one, and it wasn't even the beginning either. They got that wrong too. And he says, but Pastor, he shows here in verse 20, this future servant of Yahweh who will be preaching in the end time the laws of peace, bringing peace to the earth. What's taking place right now with the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program? It is going out. It's going forth, and what's it accomplishing? Slowly but surely, it is starting to bring peace to those who are choosing to apply it. And remember, we've been told, and Pastor has said, that the only way that this program won't work is if it's not applied. The laws of Yahweh are perfect. Remember, Psalm 19 says the laws of Yahweh are perfect. They will convert the whole person. But they can only convert the whole person if we apply them. We have to put them to work. We have to know them. We have to read them. We have to study them. And we can have all the knowledge in the world, but if we don't apply it, it's not going to be of any benefit. Okay, now these seals, I already covered that. These seals were to be removed by the seventh Moloch, the last day's witness, is the one who actually reveals these secrets. And then in verse 22 here, it says in verse 7, there he says in Revelation 10:7, but in the days of the voice of the seventh Moloch, when he will begin to sound, this great secret, again, that was the one we just talked about, that great secret by Daniel would be revealed. And now it's here. We're in the end, and it's being revealed. The secrets of Yahweh are being revealed at his house, where he chooses to place his name on you, if you can get that now, he says. And that's where he chooses to place his name. That's where he judges you from. He judges you from his house. Remember, judgment begins at the house of Yahweh. It begins with us. Because we're the ones that are being taught. We're the ones that have been called. We're the ones that are attempting to qualify to be teachers in this great kingdom. He says that's where he judges you from his house. Whether or not you, as he says, whether or not you will choose this or not, this is where he gives it to you. This is where we get it. And this is why we keep the feast. This is one of the reasons that we keep the feast 3 times a year. We come here to learn to reverence Yahweh. And then in verse 24 here, Pastor, he shows here, he says, why? He says, he gets this asked all the time, why is there all of this suffering? Well, Yahweh doesn't want you to sin, so he wants to impress this on your mind, the pain that it causes. He wants it firmly established in our mind. Does anybody remember the war zone that was set up down here not too long ago, a few feasts ago? You remember that? Has there anybody here that's actually been to a war zone where they have seen things along that line, like similar to what we saw down here? My guess is that there are very, very few people that have ever been exposed to a war zone and to the utter destruction and just the confusion and the hurt and the pain that is caused by that. And that is what Pastor was trying to impress upon the people, the severity and just everything that goes along with that. If you went down there with that mindset, man, this stuff's really coming, it couldn't help. There is no way that you could not be affected by what you saw. It was a very, very powerful teaching tool. And Yahweh willing, everybody took advantage of that. But it was there. It was there to drive it home. You know, pastors mentioned the state school before. You know, he's mentioned birth defects, with, children, children with birth defects. What is it that causes them? What causes these things to begin with? What's STDs? And people actually get upset. People actually get upset when they find, when pastor has told them that the reason that their child has a birth defect is because of an STD. I've seen people go absolutely ballistic. I mean, I've seen them get so upset and mad and go stomping around because of that. Why? Why in the world would you get upset with that? Why should we get upset with that? It's there, it's what sin brings. It's an opportunity for us to see right there right there what sin brings. It's not just words. It's not just words in a book. These words that are in these scriptures here, they're not just idle words. But these scriptures, these words, these laws that are written here, they are life. And when we deviate from the things that we see in here, yes, we're going to see and experience the things that we saw down there in the war zone, except it won't be as a teaching tool. It's going to be for real. When we see the sickness, when we see people dying from cancer, when we see people dying from these things, or we see somebody with birth defects, yes, it's a very real thing, and we should make the connection with that and see we don't want to be a part of this ever again. But praise Yahweh, the people that have to, the children that have to experience these things, these birth defects and these sicknesses and diseases, as I said before, we know they're temporary. Because in due time, they're going to be healed. They will be restored to perfection. And then they're going to be given the opportunity. They're going to be given the opportunity to have eternal life. So it's a temporary thing. That doesn't mean to look at it lightly, but understand and realize it's temporary, but also realize it was the violation of these laws that brought those about. The messenger, the voice of the seventh Malach, he teaches us the laws of Yahweh. He teaches us the way to peace. He teaches us Yahweh's righteous character. He teaches us to keep the laws, just like the prophets of old did, just like Yeshua did. Remember Yahweh's character. Remember the 12 stones in the high priest's breastplate. Remember, those all represent certain characteristics. The very name of Yahweh, and the very name in Yahweh of Yahweh, in Exodus 34. Remember, those characteristics were revealed to Moshe. In Exodus 28, we're shown the different stones of the high priest's breastplate and what those stones represent. There was a sermon that was given. There were actually a series of sermons that were given over those stones. It has been several years ago, but I'm sure that it's still available. We just need to go back and remind that. The ruby, remember, it means to be obedient. The topaz has to a reminder to remain pure and holy in all things. The beryl, that we are to be bringers of light, and we're training to be that bringers of light. We're learning what to teach so we can teach what we've learned. And all of these things are set in that gold. Remember, the stones of the high priest's breastplate, they were set in gold. And remember what that gold represents. The golden altar. Remember what that golden altar represented, Pastor? He showed that over here in verse 34 on page 20. He said, upon the golden altar which was before the throne. And he says, the gold that we're reaching for right now. He shows us that gold that we are reaching for right now represents this golden altar. Remember, it represents life. It represents that perfection. It's not the altar of death, but it's that altar that represents that golden, that perfection. It represents life. And that's what that represents. So may Yahweh be with you and bless you, men. If everyone will stand, I'm going to go ahead and turn the services over, the class over to the great Kahan, Kananya Hawkins.
Here's Yahweh. Shabbat Shalom, men.
Shalom.
You may be seated. All right, we'll be continuing on page 21 there in chapter 2 of this sermon here, entitled These Prophecies Being Fulfilled. The news today showing prophecy fulfilled, the end is near. We'll be continuing unity with the great Khan Pariah there and the importance of everything that Pastor has shown us and what we're seeing coming through, Revelations, and he's been hitting on Revelations the last couple of Sabbaths, and the importance of us understanding and getting into unity with him and these prophecies as they're coming to pass right now, because we're the only people on the face of the earth. You have all these guys that are out there, these preachers that, they teach about, what the Lord has revealed to them in the book of Revelations or the Apocalypse, and they're still waiting for tribulation to come. One day that 7-year tribulation is going to get here, and eventually, that's going to take place, and, well, of course, they're going to get raptured up first, but, they're going to be pretty surprised when they realize there is no rapture, and there's a scripture in Isaiah that talks about, or maybe it's not Isaiah, but it's a scripture that talks about, they're going to be actually saying, oh, no, man, I wasn't a preacher, I was a farmer, I was a farmer, I was a fisherman, I didn't do no preaching, oh, no, you're talking about my twin brother, that guy, right? They're going to be denying the fact that they actually were a part of this system that spread these lies to the people, making them think that there was something, better or more glorious, or actually what it was a faithless works. They totally ignore the fact that the apostle said, show me your faith or your works, your faith without your works, and I'll show you my faith by my works, through my works. So faith without works is dead, and that's what you see coming forth from this beastly system here. And as the Pope is spewing off his garbage, his baloney, he'd do better to stand on his head, and it'd be the same stuff coming out, trying to teach the people and deceive them into thinking that you don't have to live by the law. All you need is justice. All you need is love. All you need is wave your hands a couple of times and sprinkle some, holy what water all over the place. But those very things are not attainable to mankind except through the law of Yahweh. You see, and us in the house of Yahweh should be able to see through this veil of deception that Satan is using her chief priest to teach to the whole world. And remember, the scripture shows that he's going to be very bold. He's going to speak very deceitfully. These dark, tricky sayings, they're only tricky to people who don't read the scriptures. If you read the scriptures, you can easily refute the garbage that comes forth from this man's mouth, because it's not scripturally based. It's based in theology, it's based in hypotheses, it's based in garbithes and all these other things with these on the end, but it's not based on the Holy Scriptures. So those of us who are trained and who have our minds sharpened in understanding by the one sent, we're able to discern between righteousness and evil. We're able to see and judge between the clean and the unclean. And that's something that we should rejoice in these last days, because remember in Colossians it says that the gods of the world, the gods have blinded the minds of the people of this world. They can't see. Their minds are totally blinded. So right now they don't really have the ability to make a right choice because they're blinded by the option of righteousness. Righteousness is not presented to them except through the house of Yahweh. And that's what we're training right now for, to be that teacher of righteousness who shows people, who cuts that veil of deception so that no longer are they blinded, no longer are they groping in the dark, but they're able to see clearly, having eyes to see, right? Having eyes to see and ears to hear the word, the message that comes forth from Yahweh's house in these last days. And it's going to bring them to Yahweh. That's what we're training for, to bring people to Yahweh. And that's what all of this is for. All these prophecies that Yahweh has set up, and everything that's taking place with the diseases that are being built up in mankind's body, with the firmament being destroyed by mankind, with the wars that are taking place, it's all to teach mankind a lesson. It's to show them. It's to allow them to do it their way. Do it their way. Okay, this is what you want to do? That's fine. But listen, I've given you a set of rules, if you want to call them that. That's what they are. I've given you a set of morals, of laws, of instructions, guidelines, standards, all these things were mentioned so that you can have the peaceful, joyful, healthy, abundant living that you so desire, and mankind desires these things, but they're going about it outside of the law of Yahweh, and with it they bring about the curses. It's like adding an ingredient to a cake or something, or taking an ingredient out, and you want you want this perfect taste of this cake. Well, when you add or you take away, it changes the recipe. And it's the same thing that the Scripture says: when you add to or you take away, you weaken the law. You weaken the law's ability to produce the righteous effect in your life that Yahweh says that it would be if you would strictly live by it without altering it one way or the other. Let's look at verse 47 here on page 21. And Pastor continues on, and he's talking about the third part here of the things here on the earth which are suffering at the hands of mankind, as Isaiah talks about in verse 24, and of course Deuteronomy 28. Yahweh shows these things will come about upon mankind because of their sins, starting in verse 15 in Deuteronomy 28. But it says, "Now if the ocean is not cleaned, and if you take some water and you put it in a pan, you can call that the sea, and you would put some of man's waste, or even waste from other creatures in it. What if you didn't have what Yahweh set up? Yahweh set up the earth to where it could cleanse itself. The sea too, it will cleanse itself. And everything that Yahweh has made for mankind, everything, every kingdom, micro kingdom, macro kingdom, is designed in a way that it is a self-sufficient organization. It's able to keep itself clean. It's able to clean up things that come into its environment. Just think about how beautifully and wonderfully and awesomely made our bodies are, and the immune system that we have that mankind is still studying. They're still trying to decipher all the different things and how the immune system works and how it protects and it does. They've got a great majority of it. I say a great majority. They've learned a lot in the last few years, but they still, a lot of it is a mystery to them, kind of like the brain. We've got these certain portions here that do this, and this is a walnut shape, and this is in the front, and your frontal cortex, and your occipital lobe, and things like that. But the rest, just gray matter. I guess it just keeps your head round, They still don't have an idea of what all that other, housing does. But, think about the way that Yahweh has made us and what he said he's going to do, and then you compare that to how many years we're going to live. When do you stop counting? How old are you? Oh, I don't know. I stopped counting 80 billion years ago. You're not even going to be thinking about it. But throughout all that time and throughout all eternity, you're going to be packing more and more and more and more knowledge into your brain. Your brain will never stop learning. When you stop learning, there's some sayings that say when a person stops learning, they start dying. And even Yahweh still does experiments in his lab and checks things out, and everything was tested out. It was tried. Just like the scripture says, the laws were tried. It was experimented with. It was made sure that it will work in producing the desired effect that Yahweh wanted it to do. And so we know that we're going to be learning throughout all eternity, and our bodies are going to be continually doing the job that they were created to do, keeping itself clean. The earth or earths or other planets that we will create, they will be created in mind with the different microorganisms and the different layers of things that are necessary, from the firmament to the soil to the oceans and everything that is needed to help keep that planetary system working proficiently and effectively to keep the occupants on it healthy. And so if Yahweh didn't have this setup here, where the earth, where the sea, where the air didn't clean itself, I don't think mankind would have made it much past maybe their first year on earth. If you think about all the waste that we put out. In fact, I was trying to find some information, and this was just done by a little study based on what's that world's tallest building in Dubai? I can't even pronounce it, but it's the really tall one over there. It's the world's tallest one, and it's made to occupy 35,000 people at any given time. All right, that building is made to occupy, what some cities are not even the size of, 35,000 people. And to make a long story short, this guy was figuring out all the waste that people put out. Because, believe it or not, in some of these countries, you have buildings that are the tallest in the world, but they're not tied into a municipal water treatment system or sewer supply system, wastewater system. So trucks come in, and they pump out all this sewage from, I guess, storage containers in the bottom of these buildings, and then they truck them to the waste containment center, where sometimes they have to wait upwards of 24 hours before they can empty their trucks. Okay? And so the man figured, with 35,000 people per day, with, the things that are produced from the bodies and brushing your teeth and washing and so forth, that many people would produce about 15 tons of sewage a day. 15 tons, okay? So now you take that, and that's just an average number. You take that and you multiply that, by, 100. Take a city that has, 3.5 million people in it or something like that. And you see how quickly this sewage can pile up. And for the most part, a lot of cities that are close to large water supplies, natural bodies of water, like lakes and oceans and rivers and so forth, a lot of them are treating it, right? And then pumping it back into the natural water supply system, okay? And so this is, also one of the reasons why the things that are in the sea are starting to suffer. It's coming from the firmament as well, but it's also coming from being pumped back in to the system from the cities treating the water that comes from the waste of the people. A lot of stuff that takes place that people don't realize. So Pastor says, that's what we've destroyed from sin, because I've been through all of this. You need to get the sermons on microorganisms, the real cause of global warming. It's called, the sermons are called that, and listen to all of them. This is what's bringing this about. This is what's bringing the global warming about. And of course, there's still skeptics that are saying, no, this is, cyclical, and the carbon this and carbon that, and just another way to make money. But these shrimp, and this is what the article was talking about here, their atmosphere being changed, they can no longer live in their environment. The shrimp are being diseased, they're being defiled, and their environment is being sickened to where their food supply, they can't handle it anymore, and they're being diseased, and where they live is being broken down, so they're moving out. Well, when the shrimp move out, and we know what shrimp do, right? They clean up and they eat. Now, this was something I didn't realize before I came to the House of Yahweh, and the many things that we ate before we learned about the House of Yahweh and the laws of Yahweh and the clean laws of Yahweh. The things that eat the garbage that comes from humans, and then we want to get a platter full of them at the local Brown Lobster, which should be called Brown Lobster restaurant, But these things, they go and they clean off the bottom of the oceans, the bottom of the seas and the rivers and so forth. And then we want to go and stick those things in their mouth saying that they're clean. It's like somebody had asked one of my parents once, because they were learning about the House of Yahweh. Well, she questioned her. She said, well, what can I do to kosher my pork? And she was so in love with pig. I mean, and people are, I'm telling you, there's like a, what do they call that? It's like a folk, is it like a folk, I can't remember what it is, but it's like when you have a following, like a cult following, like people following after the pig, and they've got bacon, they got bacon, what do you call those, air fresheners hanging from their cars. They eat like bacon lollipops. They got on their license plates, ILVBCN, I mean, they're like totally addicted to bacon. It's absolutely insane. And they've made a lot of money by seasoning that death to make it smell and taste great. Well, it don't smell great, but they make it taste great. And people, they don't realize that every bite they take, they're taking a bite of death. But those animals, too, are designed to clean up the earth after mankind. So far, I don't know that the pigs have suffered in a way that they're not able to do their jobs, but I do know that they're suffering because of what mankind is doing. So we know that there is not anything on this earth that is going to be untouched as a result of man's sins. Everything from in the earth, in the waters beneath, in the skies above. Even the scripture says, reached into the heavens. And we talked about that before, how far things actually leave from the surface of the earth into the air and actually goes out into outer space. And that actually mingles with solar winds and so forth, and it's able to be carried to other planets. And remember, they found some microbes from Earth on different planets and so forth. And that's why Yahweh says we have to keep the laws of Yahweh, because it ripples outward and we affect everything around us. Let's look on page 22 there. Skip on down to verse 54, because we're talking about the water supply here. And we're talking about, there's this article here about these fishermen who fish for, all these shrimp, and their production is dropping, year after year after year, because the shrimp they're not there anymore. And the corals, they're dying as well. It has nothing to do with the shrimp, but a lot of the corals are dying. And remember the articles that actually came out as a result showing that they found herpes in the coral reef, which is, from mankind. Mankind created these gods, newly come up, due to their activities. Coral, dogs, trees, plants, they can't break the law of Yahweh. They can't go out and fornicate or eat an unclean food or anything like that. It's mankind who does these sins, and we are the ones that affect our environment. And this is why Yahweh says, in keeping these things, in this generation that I'm bringing up, this priesthood, they will guard and keep and protect my creation. And it will be kept that way throughout all eternity. It'll never go back again, because why? We'll never sin again. In verse 54, it says, now, in the articles on global warming and the lesson on global warming, we actually we have proof that STDs, in fact, it was herpes that was killing off the coral reefs, Pastor says. Why in the heavens can't they realize? Why can't our scientists realize this same thing we're dumping into the sea, into the lakes, into the water, that's latching onto all the microorganisms that make up the cleaning supply of the ocean? Why can't they see that? And it's doing the same thing in the air. Why are these people going out of business, they ask? Well, you're putting yourself out of business by not following the laws of Yahweh, which would have kept our oceans clean and free of filth and death. And of course, they wouldn't have been fishing for shrimp either, because the shrimp will be able to do their job in keeping the oceans clean, so that all the rest of the clean and the healthy fish that we can eat. We've got, tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of species of fish that are in the waters that we could eat. And mankind wants to go all the way down through all those clean fish, all the way past those nice, yummy trout and, bass. And, that's about the extent of my fish knowledge right there. And they want to go all the way to the bottom and get these poop eaters. I want the lobster, I want the shrimp, I want the scampi, I want those things. And bring them back up and say, this is some great eating right here. They bypass, it's like bypassing all the laws of Yahweh, and trying to have something beneficial that only thing it has in it is death. And so it's silly, but that goes back into the deception and the gods blinding the minds of the people of this world. Look at verse 59 there. It says, in Revelations 8:11, he says, in the name of the star, well, we got to go back to verse 10, and the third malach sounded, and there fell a great star from heaven, burning as it were like a lamp, and it fell upon the third part of the rivers. Now, rivers, this is the rivers now, not the sea. We just covered that, but this fell upon the rivers and the fountains of water. So this will be your drinking supply, your drinking water. You got that? He says in verse 11, the same water, and the name of the star that fell was wormwood, and the third part of the waters. Now we're talking about drinking waters here. Let's see here. Okay, let me finish that. The drinking waters became wormwood, and many men died. Now this is something that's going to cause mass killings. You see that? Read what's going on. I'm sorry, I skipped it. Read it for yourself. This is something that's going to cause mass killings in the earth. Everyone has or must have water. Now, if you put filth in your bodies, in your water, and you drink it, it will kill you. Many men died of the waters because they were made bitter. And we've talked a little bit about We went not that long ago down to the Rio Grande, and we examined, and we were able to go on this tour on this brand new water treatment facility, and of course the river was kind of low that day, but I think a little over, if I'm not mistaken, when I checked, there was a little over 6 million people that draw water off that almost 1,300-mile-long river, the Rio Grande River. And so imagine these waters being contaminated and all, that great number of people drawing water off of that. In fact, we have a local water supply company here that I was able to ask them if I can get a sample of their, see if we can, is this working here? Okay. We got where's it at? There we go. Source One water supply. All right. Now they're saying that this is safe to eat, safe to drink. All right. Bottled at the source, 100% organic too. Right? That's their pure drinking water that they're wanting to give you there. Just take it right from the sewage treatment, run it through a couple carbon filters, dump a little chlorine in it, and there you go, some nice drinking water. Corn and nuts and everything to go with it. 100% organic. You get your fiber and everything to boot, right? All right there in your water. And all your antibiotics and your prescription drugs, you'll never have an ache in your body. You won't even be psychotic. No more bipolar. You're getting it in as a byproduct in your drinking water, right? Well, this is what they're wanting to do. They're wanting to take the water that they have pumped out, and this is due in part because of these droughts, and the water supplies are starting to drop, and they're dropping really, really low. Most of the lakes right now have become ponds, and most of them have become just little puddles, really. I think they're going to get the cities out there to start mowing the grass down there because there's nothing but grass left there. But they're wanting to take the water that comes from the supply, the wastewater, run it through a treatment system, and then pump it back out to you into the fresh city supply. Now, several doctors and scientific reports have shown regarding these STDs, regarding many of these pharmaceutical drugs, that they're able to pass through the smallest barrier filters within our own body. And our body has the finest filtration system that there is, okay? But these drugs, these STDs, they're able to pass through these filtration systems and get to major organs, to get through places like the blood-brain barrier, the big protective sac that's, protects your brain, and anything that gets in there has to have a certain code. It's like getting on the executive elevator. You have to have the key to turn it on to be able to go all the way to the top floor. And remember, Pastor brought out that research talking about the zonulin and zot that have receptors that latch on, and they actually start in your gut, and they go from the gut to your brain, okay? And things are able to latch onto those receptors and get to places that they shouldn't be because they have, I guess this would be safe to say, they have evolved. Following after the way of Cain, these gods have evolved to do things that are dangerous to your body. Now, the creation that Yahweh's made would never do that. But when mankind goes outside of the law, you get evolution. That's where you get the evolution from, Pope. It's from outside of the law. Now, verse 62, it says, if you turn over Colossians, he says, don't just take this for what we see, but turn over to here, and he talks about this bitterness, about the waters being made bitter, and he compares it and he shows where this word actually comes from, and it ties back into even the bitter, the angry, the hateful, the violence that you see. Yes, it can be between husband and wife, shouldn't be. It could be between brother, man and his neighbor, shouldn't be, but it is. The violence that we see taking place in the news right now, the city of Ferguson, Missouri is on edge. They're not knowing what to expect. And I don't know if that verdict came out yet or not, but, that was part of what was on the news all day, and them showing they're going to let the schools know in advance, and get everybody ready, because I think that they're expecting exactly what that man showed on when we watched the news not that long ago. They're expecting a war. They're expecting, I guess that will be a civil war, in their own country. And this is what occurs when you have people who are ungoverned by rules, okay? And when you have a system where there is no true justice, or no one to stand for justice. In verse 64, now go back to Revelations 8 and notice again, bitter, embittered, irritate, aggravate, annoy. Well, how many times have we brought the sermons of what we've done to our bodies, what we're causing our bodies to go through? It causes confusion to the mind. In Deuteronomy, let me just write that for yourself. 28:28 talks about that Yahweh says you will have this confusion in your mind, this wasting and so forth. It brings hatred and wars. I'm going to read that there in Jacob. We got 5 minutes left. In Jacob chapter 4, this makes so much sense. We've read it 100 times, and then Pastor makes one simple point, and it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I see it now. So he says in 4 verse 1, what causes these wars and fightings? What causes war and fighting among you? Is it not from your lust that battle in your members? Okay? And this is, something that we also have to keep in mind in regards to wars is the war starts in the mind. And it can start with something as simple as this, lusting after what belongs to someone else. Lusting after what belongs to someone else. And plotting in your mind to take what is owned by your neighbor. Not respecting those rights of ownership. And this is why the scripture shows that those who break their vows and those who steal, they won't be in the kingdom. They won't be there. Stealing. By trickery, by deceit. Taking what someone else has lawfully acquired. That system doesn't work. Never has. You lust but do not have, and murder and covet but cannot obtain. You fight and war, yet you do not have because you do not ask. And when you do, you just want to spend it on your own pleasures. Not for something to build the house of Yahweh, not for something to be a benefit to your neighbor, but for your own lust. Well, this is what you see here. The prophets believed before us and actually forecast what was going to take place. And Yeshua talked about that in Matthew 24, verse 7 and 12, about the wars, about the love growing cold. Isaiah even talked about it, the pride that was in mankind as a result of following the way of Cain, which his teacher was Satan, and her pride is what brought her down, and it's the same thing that's bringing man down right now. Let's look at verse 71. Now you know what brought this about, and they still can't get it. What brought this about is what we do to put the anger and the hatred in the mind. It could have been the reason Cain killed Abel, could have been because he started eating pork, because pork does that to the brain. It makes you aggressive, very aggressive. In fact, armies fed pork blood to their soldiers, history shows, to make them aggressive. It makes them want to kill, but the trouble was they said they went to killing each other. And of course, it cut down on their armies, so they had to weaken the pork somewhat, the blood somewhat. They had to kind of water it down. Well, that's what you get from man's system. Whenever they try to find a way to take advantage of their neighbor, to fill their pockets with wealth and so forth, to disregard what Yahweh has created and the order and the rules that Yahweh has set for mankind to have healthy living, then they end up bringing about more curses for themselves. It's like the guy who thinks that his car gets 40 miles to the gallon. It's a really fuel efficient car. He's heard that diesel is supposed to be even more fuel efficient. So instead of putting gasoline in his car, he puts diesel in his car, thinking that maybe he'll get 80 miles to the gallon now. But he's tore his motor up, tore his fuel pump up and everything. He's went outside the rules and the guidelines that were set by the manufacturer in order for him to have a vehicle that would function the way it was supposed to. And that's the same way that mankind has done by going outside of the laws of Yahweh. Well, the manufacturer of our bodies, our minds, the earth and everything that creeps in it has given us rules, guidelines that will enable us to stay healthy, enable the earth to stay healthy so that it can support life, support our life. When we put diesel in our tanks, we screw everything up. So let's just keep these things in mind and know that our training for what we're getting ready to do right now it's very important. It's one of the most important phases of these 7 works, because it's going to bring it all to a completion here, and we're going to be the evidence of the power of Yahweh's laws to change the heart and the minds, and evidence that, yes, if it can do it in a time period where it's the peak of sin, it can do it in any time, in any place, with anyone.